What's up, guys? I'm back with another What If. This is what if Issei was the Avatar, master of all elements. There's fire, earth, air, and water. Now, you might wonder, how am I going to incorporate Avatar from Avatar to High School DxD? Now, I wasn't really certain about it, but I thought I'd take a little shot in the dark and go with this. So in this version, the Avatar is considered one of the strongest creatures in existence. In peak, Avatar state can even reach equivalent power to that of Great Red, but only for moments. Considerably the second strongest, right above that of the Infinite Dragon herself, but right beneath that of the Dragon of Dreams. Now keep in mind, those two are basically rivals, so that just gives a show of how powerful the true Avatar state is. Now, there's no one who's been as strong as the original Avatar in a long time. And that was someone who went toe-to-toe with Great Red in his peak. Well, Great Red's still technically in his peak since he's still at the same strength level. But Ophis, the Infinite Dragon, went toe-to-toe with her and Great Red on the same day and won both fights. Considered to be the strongest, but it was a one-time thing, they thought, since no other Avatar had ever done that. Well, until now. Now, the way we work is that he enters Avatar state when his eyes start to glow. Now, here's basic Issei. We all know about this one. Here's him using the boosted gear, which he will still have. This is when he's in Avatar state, when his eyes glow green. But he will still mainly use his boosted gear. But this is what his appearance would become more look like, though he would get the arrows, but he wouldn't exactly get, they would just kind of more of appear than they would always be there. They would just appear out of nowhere, really. When he's angry, you can just see it on his face. And there's always murals of the original avatars. Now, back to Issei. When he was younger, he never really got into the Avatar state, but he had heard tales of this legendary warrior of the Avatar. Now, he thought it was all made up, honestly. No one can use the elements, but who knows? Now, in this version, magic, the ability to manipulate fire, earth, wind, air, whatever, anyone can do that. Anyone can manipulate those elements, but they're more fake elements. It's like, you can't use water magic to produce actual water. It's the water technically, but it's not actually real water. It's like not true. Like how you can't create magical flames without them being a little bit different from the regular flames. There's nothing pure of each of these elements. They could be used, yes, but they wouldn't be on par with bending. Bending is technically stronger than magic. It's like the better alternative. Now, benders are considered stronger than magic wielders, because they devote their lives to a single element. The only way to become a bender is to be born into a bender life, or to be given the power blessed upon you by a god. Which gods have the ability to give bending abilities, but no one's been able to give the ability of the Avatar. Only one person can have that at a time. And it's when they die, it goes on to the next one. Now, the person before Issei was in a heated argument with two people. Kokabil, before him was a master of the flames. He would throw fire with little to no effort. And he could use water, air, earth, all that, but he was mainly using flames. He chose to fight the worst group to use this against. An entire tribe of water spirits, which are considerably strong. And he was also fighting, while doing this, 3 different factions. Angels, demons, fallen angels, because he'd pissed them all off. The last Avatar was the rudest in the land. He was considered to be stronger than most, but he was about 40 whenever he was in his Avatar state. And he wasn't exactly using Avatar state properly. He used it every once in a while for full-powered blasts, but that was it. And it wasn't the true Avatar state because he was technically in control completely. The other Avatars weren't. The other Avatars warned him not to do it, but he never listened. the way he did it, he beat most of the water spirits, but he lost. There was still a good bit that escaped, so there was still water spirits. But then he was hit with the meanest uppercut from Sir Zex. But he got into his full form. As he went into his avatar state, he was trying to beat Sir Zex. He thought he could, until Michael and Azazel both jumped down too. When he was hit with a complete power destruction ball, it almost killed him. But he used his element to try to stop it, though it absorbed most of his element, which he was using fire when he did it. He thought it would be okay, but it wasn't enough. So he actually wound up using earth to try to stop it, which still didn't stop it, but it slowed it down. Just for Azazel's one light spear to be enough to stop this avatar grab right. Although this avatar was willing to use his full force. As his full force, fire was considerably more powerful than most of Angel's light spears. As he threw that one solid punch, it burned most towards direction, or was a giant beam versus a spear that was able to wipe out an entire, planet if it wanted to. As these two things connected, they bounced. Well, not really bounced off, but they kind of destroyed each other. The blast was halted because Michael's barrier, but that was only barely. And then Michael kind of caged up this avatar, just for the avatar to use his full force, and kind of do a breakdancing fire move where he shot fire out of his legs to kick at people, which did leave a small burn right on top of the chest of Sir Zex. And this was one of the only people who have ever been able to injure him, showing how strong the avatar truly is. This guy was probably considered top 12 strongest in the world. No more, no less. So him losing was crazy, but it also made a lot of sense. He wasn't exactly on the par with people he was fighting. Now, could he beat one at a time? Probably with the avatar state, because by himself he was ranked 12th. With limited avatar usage, he was considered maybe rank 4th. Only being weaker than the trifecta, which is God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, the second strongest, Ophis, and the strongest Great Red, and maybe 5th if you're counting the original Avatar. But the Avatar, his ranking changes every time he's reborn. So yes, while the strongest Avatar is probably ranked number 2, or even 1, the weakest Avatar is probably ranked number 7,000 on the strongest creatures alive. Just how much power the Avatar state gives you in general, it makes you crazy powerful. Now, in this version, we get to see a whole different side of this guy. As he does this one burn that was left on Sir Zex's chest was shaped like a footprint, but not normal. It was burned into him like a footprint. As you could see that Sir Zex was pissed, as he pulled his arm back with full force destruction hitting this Avatar state, as this guy wasn't able to hit an Avatar state before he was absolutely destroyed. And this is when Issei was born. And as exhausted Sir Zex was, when he got home, he hit the floor. In fact, Azazel and Michael carried him home, dropped him off for Graphia. Graphia took a Phoenix tear and used it to repair the King of Demons. Now, when Sir Zex was back on his feet, he was actually pretty calm. He was actually happy to finally meet someone who could match his strength. But he was also very worried, since that guy was strong, and who knows where the next Avatar is. Worst part was that they didn't know why this one Avatar had started attacking. He was supposed to keep balance, not attack everyone. It's like he wanted to die. Which was weird, but that's not what we're touching upon right now. As Issei grew up, he found out his ability to manipulate the wind. If it was ever too windy for him to deal with and he wanted to stop it, he could just move his hand and it would. He had perfect manipulation over the wind, not even knowing how to do it. Now granted, he was pretty light on his feet, but he never knew why. He loved flying kites and all that when he was little, but he didn't figure out why the wind always was such calling to him. As he grew older, he figured out why. The wind bowed to him. As one day when he was about 14, keep in mind the anime takes place when he's about 17, and kind of begins when he's 16, so yeah. When he's 14, he wakes up one morning. He thought he woke up, but then he's in this white void. And he meets all the previous avatars, including the one right before him. And the person he meets is his size. Which surprised him. He met all the avatars, the strongest one being the first one to speak to him, having his hand out saying, "Hello, my boy. My name is Avatar Roku. Considerably the strongest and original avatar. I feel you could even become stronger than me one day, boy." Now, this was the original avatar in this verse, so yeah. As he used his full force, he blessed the boy with everything, the power he had. Now, that doesn't make him instantly as strong as Great Red, it just gives him a little bit more figuring out what he's able to do. Teaches him how to bend and all that. So for him, what was 10 seconds of sleep was to everyone. For everyone else, what was 10 seconds of sleep was for him 30 years in the Avatar void. As he was confused what was going on, he woke up. He asked how long he had been out, since they had said, "Don't worry, time is really not relevant here." Confused, they asked, "What do you mean?" "Well, as like we've been the elements, we can bend the flow of time. Only in this dimension, though. So, you're the only one who can enter this dimension. It's the Avatar state. But, whenever you're in this dimension, you can do anything, for as long as you want." So, after 30 years to him have passed, it was only 10 seconds. He hasn't changed his maturity level at all. He's still the same guy. He literally didn't change at all over after that time of training. Although he isn't as powerful as he'd like to be, he does know how to perfectly bend now. As Issei, over the next few years, would start gaining more strength. Every night he would bend the elements. He always had a water bottle in his room, which his parents didn't really care about. He was just drinking water, they thought. And in fact, he was actually using it to make him move around to his wishes. In fact, using it mainly like it was a piano key. Never putting enough force into it to really full force it. But there was a time he had seen this pond. He had spun it with his finger to make it a small whirlpool. But no one could notice this since it wasn't magic. It didn't appear on anyone's radar, just he was bending it to make it do what he wanted. Now, this is when Issei had figured something out. There was a lake behind Kuo in the woods, and he went over there. He looked around and saw nobody. There was no one there, except for one devil girl that was hidden from Issei's sight. Using magic, of course. This girl was Rias. And this was back when Issei was 15. Or actually, I'd say it was just when he got about 2 weeks after he learned his powers. As he used the wind to clear the birds away from him. As he was able to make one that he could stand on, and he used it kind of like a skateboard. The way there was the way Aang did it, and then there's this way, which is just him standing on it like a skateboard or anything. And then there was this weird feeling he got while he was doing this. As he looked at the water, as he moved his hands, spinning his hands around for a second, he hit it with full force in that direction, and there was a giant tidal wave that stood up, but it did never go down. As it started to move around, he could control it like tendrils with his hands, with his even thoughts making it seem stronger. His eyes start to glow just a little bit like this, but he's not mad, he's just glowing. As he puts out a full palm, which was able to even put a dent in the ground. This was just from his airbending that puts a dent in the ground. As he would land on the ground, he would hit his foot on the ground as it would make the entirety of it shake. As he would see a giant pillar stand up. As it would shoot up with a full-on spike, he would learn how to do it more. Even taking his shoes off and everything while he was working. Decided to dress more like this. Only wearing the jeans he was wearing at the time, he was starting to actually bend the elements. As water and fire started surrounding him. With air and rock, too. Every hit he did would throw it around. He was having fun. Rias saw what was going on. This wasn't magic. There was mages who could do stuff like this, but they weren't on this level. This kid was playing with the elements. He was bending them. There's only one person that could do this, and that was the legendary Avatar. But he'd been missing for almost 20 years. Rias, his brother, never told her what happened to the last Avatar. Now, she knew what the cycle was, and she knew the last one was fires, so it would only make sense for this one to be air. Which she thought, yeah, maybe he's going to use his powers? As Issei was proceed to keep training, and then an image flashed in his head of a fire master. The last one before him, the one before the last one before him, who had said, "It is better to know your path than to fight with power only." Confused at what that meant, he was wondering. But then his hands started to move on their own as he was in an Avatar state. And the Avatar had started using the abilities properly. The fire was perfectly mastered by this one. It was a fire wielder. The previous air wielder started showing his abilities. The air whip that was strong enough to straight up rip someone's head apart, ripped through some of the strongest creatures alive if it hit them. Then he was starting to coast and fly on the air without even having any help. Even without using any other elements, only using air beneath his feet, he could shoot it away. As his flight was more like Superman as he was putting his fists out in front of him. But this is when he used earth to combine it into it, making iron gloves, making these earth-like gloves, that he had noticed he could probably use to box pretty well. But trying to combine the two, and then he noticed he could speed up with fire. But then noticing he'd need something to protect himself while flying, as water would start to come to him by his will, making a kind of suit of armor made of water. As he would land, he would notice that his feet and hands got covered in rocks. His torso, all the way up to where his gauntlets cut off, water. There was green glowing eyes that were left open, showing him. His hair was like its normal shape, but there was notably water around it, but not touching it, as there was a cushion between each and everything and him. And then the air was allowing him to just do whatever he wanted. He felt free. But then he heard a branch snap. As all the elements flew off of him, he landed saying, "Huh?" And he saw nothing. He thought he heard a branch snap, but there was no one there. As he breathed out a sigh of relief, and went back to using the water as small little things. Though he didn't know what that was. And over the next few years, Issei would train harder. When he turned 16, he was becoming very strong. About 3 months later, he was doing his normal thing, going to school and all that, faking being a normal student, even though he was strong enough to probably take over the world, but he still had to figure out what his powers were. He couldn't just go willy-nilly on people. What was his abilities? He knew he was something called the Avatar, but he didn't know what that was. He knew something about spirits and being strong, and he didn't know what any of this meant. Though he had mastered his abilities, he didn't master his mind yet, which is something you need to do to master the Avatar state, and the true abilities of the Avatar. As Issei would drop all of his as he was walking, he felt an odd presence. It's like something bad was going to happen, but then he saw Yuma. As she would ask him out, he would actually agree. He thought, finally, something normal. And then they decided to have a date Saturday. And they did. But something was off. Saturday was normal, at least until they got together. As Issei was dressed up and everything, they went on their date, they got out of it, they were good. But then, he completely did something that was unexplainable. He proceeded to hit the ground with a single poke. Confusing to most, but this seemed familiar to the fallen angel. She knew one of the far-off avatars from way back when. She was the one who killed him. As he had barely awakened his abilities, as he was a human, yes, but he was also very powerful. Though not knowing his own abilities, whenever he touched the ground, he would kind of chalk at the world, try to make a little sign to keep everything calm. Not expecting whenever he did that, when he stood up, he was hit with the chest with a light spear from Yuma as a job. But then, as this brought the memory back to Yuma, she was surprised. It couldn't be the Avatar. After all these years, why would she be sent to kill a second Avatar? And she was still riding the coattails of the last one she killed. Since even though she had to sneak him, and it was very long, after he just won an entire war by himself, and he wasn't even that strong, he was just like bending willy-nilly. But he was exhausted, so he didn't have any more abilities to use, but he did want to calm the earth since he was originally an earth type. Just to get hit clean with the light spear that pierced clean through him. As Issei would walk, and whenever she asked, "Would you die for me?" in that voice, that haunted Issei for a second. He saw her, and he stopped being Issei for a moment. His eyes grew green, and you could hear his knuckles crunch as he pulled his hands back with full force and swung. He didn't plan to use air, earth, or water, but he used full force fire, as it would almost burn the fallen angel. It would be stopped through her light spear, which she sent right at it, though with the clash of the two, they would both somehow explode. As Issei stood standing tall with rage, his eyes started to glow, but he wasn't using full Avatar state. And why was that? Because he didn't have the full access. He hadn't gained that just yet. He was still on the fence about it. As he would try using wind, which was more than enough to overwhelm Yuma's speed. She was being blown back every moment. But Issei never put anything to kill in his arsenal, so all he ever had was playing around. Then he made Earth Gauntlets, which he was using, but he wasn't as fast as the fallen angel. He was able to keep up somewhat with his speed, but not much. When it came to full flight speed, he was able to outclass her, but he couldn't match her in hand speed. So she would stab him, but surprisingly enough, his earth armor would stop it just in time for him to be able to use the water whip technique, which was fast enough to leave a scratch clean over her chest. As he thought he had won that with that move, but there was no blood, as she would start swinging a full light spear to kill him, just for her to have shot it clean through his heart with the spear. As he pulled it out, using his fire to kind of brace his hand, as he would kind of try singeing the wound closed, it wouldn't work, since it was too painful. As he would decide to use his own blood to bend it, as he took blood and marked his eyes right beneath them, as if he was teary-eyed. You could see the flames in his eyes as rage started to overwhelm him. The earth starts to shake, and the water from that pond starts to rise. It was the only water in the area. As his calmness would overwhelm her, she saw the moon for a second as it hit her, as she was hit with a tidal wave strong enough to almost kill her. As she couldn't breathe, she was being suffocated in the water. Right before it was able to kill her. Boom, one hit. She gasped for air, as she saw Issei hit the floor with a spear clean through his chest. It was Donaseek. He hid in the bushes waiting. As he fell and hit the ground, Issei looked at her, and with tears he said, "Damn it, I lost." This only made him angrier. As he was about to hit Avatar state, his body gave in. He woke up in his bed the next morning thinking something's odd. He looked down, and Their scar was not there. His back wasn't hurt anything. He was fine. What's going on? This is when he truly would try going back in Avatar state, noting that he was still only able to use his temporary form. He tried for a second to use Mastered Avatar, which was hard to use, but he couldn't do it for a few seconds. But whenever he fell out of it, he was exhausted and almost went back to bed. Being that this was him waking up in the middle of the night, or actually he would just wake up in the morning, which he was confused, but it was Sunday, so he didn't really care. Sundays he would always just go to sleep and never get up. So why did he wake up on alarm? He thought he takes us off usually Saturday nights. As he was confused where his abilities, his skills were, where he is, he was done. He would try to use his skills, but they wouldn't work. A few days later, he went to school and then went to meet and met Rias, and all that happened like normal. Though, in this version, whenever he had first had to deal with some people, it was pretty easy for him. Whenever, Calwinner went to go attack Issei, she was hit straight with a plasma blast because he was not holding back. He recognized those wings, so he didn't care much. His full force blast was almost enough to kill her, but that also awakened the gear. The boosting gear of Drake. Now, Drake was actually around whenever the Avatars were actually fighting, but he wasn't as strong. As he would notice that this would be what kind of led to a kind of crazy battle. As Issei would go through the same stuff, meet Asya, that would still happen. Then he would try to save Asya, which still worked out well, with her being revived though, so that was sad. But whenever she died, something changed in Issei for a moment. He would have been yelling the Juggernaut Drive chant, but he didn't do it. He needed at least to use Balance Breaker once first. So he simply became the truest Avatar. Every step he took, you could feel emotion break. His eyes started to just be swelling with blood dripping off of them. Or at least that's what it looked like. But what he didn't tell them is that it wasn't his blood. They thought he had barely moved and there was tears of blood coming off his eyes. But no. They looked at his hand. He was holding something. Rainier saw there was a heart in his hand. As Issei said, "I didn't think you had one, Rainier," as he had crushed it. But then he had shown that he had marked his eyes himself. Loving the feeling as he was enraged. Every step he took, fear shook the fallen. Now yes, he had just killed her. But she wasn't technically dead. Taking a heart out of a fallen angel wouldn't do much. If you're wondering what I mean, in this version, Fallens have 2 hearts, angels have 3, and devils have, about 4. If you're wondering why they go down or up or anything like that, it just really depends. The strongest type of devil has 7. Strongest type of angel, 7. Strongest type of fallen, about it, 7. So tiers usually have about 2 hearts, more than human, so it's still more than humans, but they still aren't exactly perfected. When they're at the strongest, they have 7, and that's at 12 wings. Now, Issei's strength did seem to almost be infinite at this moment. He figured out that she had a second heart, but he didn't want to crush it. He wanted to crush her individually. As he started surrounding her with the mere air she breathed, making it as if it was spikes, ripping apart her lungs. He pulled out every stop to make her as painful, the most painful death as possible, as he would take the healing of Twilight from her, using his ability of bending to bend anything. He would take it into his hand, give it to Asya truestly back, setting her down with tears. I'm sorry, Asya, I didn't save you. When Reese would offer to revive her as her bishop, Issei would instantly say, please, please, as she would, as Asya would become the bishop. But then we have to go with a few more things and then deal with Riser. They're pretty much having no problem doing the, quests and stuff. Those are pretty easy, and as the Avatar, Issei can just do whatever he wants. He even blessed the guy with the ability to use somewhat bending. He can manipulate elements, but not quite good. He can manipulate only one or two. He can manipulate one, okay? The guy won't always be able to use fire to his abilities, and he was basically given the weakest variation of firebending. He could train it to become as strong as possible, but it was still at the beginner stage since the guy didn't know how to train it. Issei told him just use it properly. Breathe in, breathe out. Be disciplined with it. Now, this guy wouldn't, but whatever. He was just some weeb who wanted the ability to bend fire. Now, he's not crazy strong anyway, so it's not a really big deal. Though Issei did tell him if he ever misused his powers, which Issei could tell if he ever did, he would come back and take that bending from him. And as Issei's eyes glowed when he said that, it was kind of terrifying, since that was all the Avatar speaking. And whenever Riser would come in, when Reese was given that offer, Issei straight up accepted, sure. But then stopped right before he was about to do anything. He stopped and looked when there was a woman who appeared. And she said, hello, how can I help you? Sorry, boy, we need to get Reese out of here and all that. And then the next day, Issei met Riser, and that stuff went pretty bad, as Issei's eyes would glow green. As his gear would appear, you would hear, Welsh Dragon. Power Booster. Since it would basically just increase his elemental powers. Thing is, what Issei didn't tell anyone that is he had a few things of water in that house. There was regular water. Now, he could bend holy water, he didn't have to touch it, but he had regular water. When Riser pissed him off and he stepped up, before that little girl hit him with any staff, he would straight up use water bending and slap Riser straight in the face, slicing it from his right forehead all the way down to his left part of his chin. As this was all cut open, we would see him heal with flames. He would say, you think you can hurt me, huh? He's saying nice flames. Try these on for size. As he would say with so much firepower that it would almost burned the building behind him, which was only stopped because, well, Akina put up a barrier that would block fire from escaping. Also, water, air, and wind will not really block it from escaping, just stop it from destroying anything in its path. As a clear hole was burned through Riser, he would put it healing, as he would say, whew. Ah, that was a close one. Not. As he would say, oh, really? Avatar state. So you're the legendary Avatar, as you would see the boosting gear. And the Welsh Dragon Emperor. Well, it's an honor to meet you, but you'll die, boy. But he didn't send a pawn. He sent one of the rooks, who, the second she hit Issei, she complained about her hand hurting, with yelling, ow, my hand! As Issei said, don't you know not to hit a mountain? Using compressed brick of mountain that was just on his chest. As he would wipe it off, saying, good job, nice try. And that's the end for part 1. I'll catch y'all later for part 2.